COVID is of course a lot of bad things, but it doesn't have to be all bad, and that there are actually opportunities also to be found there.
All right, so our next panel is on investments from ventures, angels, and it is going to be moderated by Canice Wu.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Daniel, I know you introduced yourself a few times, but maybe there'll be some new audience. So Daniel, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Canice. I feel a little bit like a broken record, but yes, I'll introduce myself. My name is Daniel Teo. I'm a managing partner at Hunniwell Lake Ventures. We are a Palo Alto-based VC firm that invests exclusively in medical devices. And within that space, our focus, our specialty is in the area of surgical innovations. These are devices and instruments that help our surgeons see, treat, and heal our patients better. C will be all of the visualization, navigation technologies, including some novel point-of-care diagnostics. Treat will be all of the treatment modalities, RF, microwave, laser, ultrasound, as well as home and portable dialysis. And then heal would be all of the tissue closure, wound closure, tissue healing, tissue regeneration kind of technologies. Those are our special areas of interest, but we can also invest outside of that if there is really an interesting opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's start with the first question here. So, the pandemic and COVID have obviously had major impact to the world, but also very significant impact to the startup and the venture capital community. What proactive strategies you as an investor have instituted in your portfolio companies?
So early on in the COVID situation, we realized that there was potentially going to be a serious cash crunch for our companies, and we worked with each of the portfolio companies to really take a look at how many months of cash they had. We sort of felt that anything short of 2 years was going to be a potential problem.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, the issue really is one of risk management at this point. The first thing you have to do is look at the burn rate, look at the amount of money they have in the bank and what their runway is, and make sure that they can extend that as far as possible, with the idea that it's very probable that there won't be a lot of capital coming in the near future due to the market shocks. I think the other thing to recognize is that many companies have had problems because they're not currently able to do clinical trials or work with hospitals.
In terms of clinical trials, I think I want to pick up on that point. Yeah, it certainly has been affected, but one of the ways in which we try and mitigate that is to have contingency plans. Try and develop alternative sites, because you don't know when and where they're going to open up. Every jurisdiction is a little bit different, especially if you're doing an international trial. Every jurisdiction has its own timing. As far as cash is concerned, that's certainly a problem, and the prudent thing to do is to conserve cash. But one of the things we realized was that, again, this depends on jurisdictions, but many of the companies that we work with actually have got exemptions. They were granted exemptions as an essential service. And so that allowed them to continue to do their work.
I think on the operations, do you see areas of operations that you think might be easing because of the urgency of the situation?
In some ways, there are funding sources available now, investors and government programs that are responding more rapidly and administratively almost.
I want to echo what Charles said. In fact, we at Hunniwell had just recently compiled a list of grants that are specially designed to fund COVID research and development, COVID-related research and development. And believe it or not, there's still about $7 billion of grant money that's out there that's still available.
Crisis creates opportunity. And I think that operationally, there have been a lot of problems, but at the same time, we've seen in our portfolio a number of opportunities that have arisen because of solutions that our companies had that would help things in this current environment. So there is a lot of money that can be invested. There is capital that's on the sidelines. And if you can point it in the right direction to deploy it, this is a terrific investing opportunity. It's changed, the culture around telemedicine, for example, has completely changed, whether it's through reimbursement, through adoption of patients, through adoption of doctors. getting good solutions that are telemedicine-based solutions, that's a phenomenal opportunity right now.
Maybe directly related to COVID, or maybe beyond, just during this environment, have your areas of interest, right, shifted or have been impacted because of COVID and the environment? Are there certain technologies or innovation that you're looking at? You talked about telemedicine and telehealth. That's a big hot word these days, but are there other areas that you see are popping up that you think actually really have some good promise?
I'll venture to say something. I think the obvious ones, of course, telehealth and remote monitoring and respiratory health, those are clearly areas that are very relevant now. But one of the problems with telehealth and remote health is payers are generally wary of funding that. Pre-COVID, there are very few CPT codes that are available, but the indications we are getting from conversations with them is that the intent is to, all of these are temporary measures, and once COVID is over, they are likely to be rolled back. So we need to kind of understand exactly what is going to survive and what isn't in order to make a better assessment there. But beyond that, beyond the obvious, we see opportunities in several areas. Number one, renal health. We know for a fact that about 10-15% of COVID patients also present acute kidney injuries as a comorbidity. The percentage for COVID patients in ICU with kidney health or renal health injuries is even higher, 20 to 40%. That means not only are kidney transplants going to be less available going forward, the need for more dialysis is going to be even greater for the next decade because of all of the 2 million people so far in the US have had COVID, and that's going to have some kind of impact on them. Beyond that, we also see that similarly in gastrointestinal GNI space, 18 to 23% of COVID patients show some form of COVID malfunction. Show some form of gastrointestinal malfunction. And therefore, we believe that non-invasive, preferably point-of-care diagnostic technologies and treatment modalities for GNI diseases and conditions will be more badly needed than ever before. And then finally, COVID also damages soft tissues significantly, leading to secondary complications. And so we believe that high-precision, energy-based surgical instruments, innovative wound closure and tissue healing solutions will also be in high demand.
I would throw a comment on that as well. COVID is really just the canary in the coal mine, and it's revealing the problems which have pre-existed, and it's exacerbated and exacerbating these previous problems. So the problems of poor lifestyle or poverty or malnutrition or other disease states, those are really the fundamental things. And let's recognize what the dog really is. It's not COVID, it's these other things.
I think what I would mostly add is that I think there's been a reawakening of the awareness of the importance of innovation in healthcare, whether it's in terms of healthcare delivery, whether it's in terms of the disparities in the social determinants of healthcare, or whether it's in terms of just creating new things, whether it's antibiotics or antivirals or what have you, that these are things we need to do. And if we wait until there is a pressing need, it's already too late. And so we have to innovate, we have to create new strategies for getting innovation out of the lab and into commercialization.
That was the question I was going to follow up on, which is, are there other related innovation or ways to kind of help distribution, supply chain, or access?
Well, one issue is, I suspect most of you over the last few years have seen one or more companies looking for funding for vaccine or vaccine delivery systems. We've always passed on them because the economics of reimbursement, now all of a sudden, these companies in the vaccine field and vaccine delivery are getting a lot more attention. I think we'll be seeing more down the road.
I mean, I think you're getting a real world example of managing disease states early versus letting them come to fruition and managing the consequences. You can see that preventative care is very effective and ultimately saves money. The question is, can we translate that new knowledge into preventative care in this country?
Great, thank you. I'm going to switch gear a little bit given this shifting gear to kind of shelter in place topic here, right? How has shelter in place, being forced to work remotely, really impacted in terms of how you've engaged with the startups, or possibly how has other companies been pitching remotely, and how have you made determination what to invest in a remote setting without having the face-to-face type of interaction? Love to get your thoughts on that.
I'll chime in. I have never been as busy.
I can identify with Charles there. I think we can certainly do a lot of work that's online, by email, by Zoom, like this, phone calls, and in some ways we're more productive than ever before. But on the other hand, in terms of making an investment, there are a couple of things that you can't do without. Usability, for instance, is very important to us, and so the ability to be able to touch and feel and see how this instrument actually works. That's definitely affected. We have offered, and then the next point, of course, is investing is not just about the technology, it's also about assessment of the team. Is this a team that can actually take it through? And you can build understanding and get all of the data through Zoom and electronic means, but you'll still need to look the founder in the eye. You still need to be able to assess for yourself from his body language, from the conversations, the side conversations they're having within the team, if this is a team that is going to be able to handle the $1 million or $2 million or whatever amount of money you're going to put in their hands, whether they're going to take good care of it.
Yeah, I just add a quick thought, because I agree with everything. I've probably been more productive in this period of time. But I think that the biggest loss is the loss of the conferences and the meeting of people in person and the networking and getting the key opinion leaders together with the companies. I think that's been very hard for the companies and very hard for investors.
So I'm sure you all heard that a lot of investors like to invest in founders and startups that are within driving distance. Virtual connection all of a sudden expanded very globally, but has this virtual connection globally affected in terms of the types of companies, or maybe the geography of the companies, and how you connect with entrepreneurs in terms of those type of relationships?
I do and always have, and so this is not such a big change for me.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay. Daniel?
Nothing has changed in terms of our geographic coverage, but again, the practical reality is that now you can't, there are many places that you can't travel to at the moment.
Why don't I just wrap up with one more question? Given all this conversations, right, in terms of, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs just in general, given this time? And also, do you have any advice for fellow investors during this time, right? So look, turn the table around a little bit in terms of how would you think about advice on both sides of the table?
What I would say to startups is that, COVID is of course a lot of bad things, but it doesn't have to be all bad. And that there are actually opportunities also to be found there, new areas that are now becoming more important. But also, what's the saying that the cream always rises to the top? And I think in this environment, it is all the more vitally important that it's going to be the top 10, 15, 25% of the companies that are going to do well and do better than ever before, pre-COVID. And if you are in that top 15, 25%, then you're good. So, tighten up your procedures, be disciplined, be very, now you have a lot more time to think instead of act. So think more and think through your plans, make them robust so that you'll come out of this process a lot stronger and better before. Okay,
well, I believe, as several people have said, that problems, times of stress, create opportunity, and the cream will rise. When I talk to entrepreneurs, make sure you consult with and show me interactions. Before you talk to me, show me interactions with, one, investors. So you've done your homework, you know what might fly or not. And secondly, tell me your interactions and support from the market, either the actual or the potential customer, because your idea of what the market needs is not as powerful as what the market says it's ready to buy.
I would agree with all of that. It comes down to, if you have a disciplined process for evaluating companies, that process, you shouldn't throw it out. You should use it. You shouldn't cut corners in it where maybe we would in a hotter market, frothier market. you know, if it's a good business doing something well that other people can't do with a team that is the right team to do it, and there's a market for the product, it should do well. And, you know, it just may need more time, more capital, but, you know, the fundamentals still work. So I think, you know, stick to your discipline and you should be okay.